Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's Thursday and we've got Alan Saunders from Steelers Now on. I want to talk to him about a lot of the different questions you guys have been sending in via our mailbag hotline and talking about receiver trades available to the Steelers. We'll talk about that. Russell Wilson playing a media game with some of the things that are being thrown out there with sourced information and our final grades on the Steelers receivers, all here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And as I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Alan Saunders. He's back from SteelersNow.com. Alan just gets back from a long, super long road trip. This man was at the Senior Bowl, then the Pro Bowl, then the Super Bowl. Alan, you have to be bowled out at this time.
I'm bowled over.
There you go. That's a better. Why didn't I think of that? This is why they pay you the big bucks. But I feel you on that, man. You have some crazy travel schedules that I'm just like, whoo, that's a lot to keep up with. Mine's picking up soon. But Alan, I want to talk to you about some of the things that people are calling in about because, as always, if you want to call into this show, we've been taking your calls. There were quite a few left while I was on vacation, so we're trying to work our way through those now. But as always, you can call in at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute. We get your name, you get your question on the show. But speaking on the Steelers wide receiver needs, you and I have talked about like drafting a wide receiver makes a lot of sense, but so is getting one in free agency. So, whether or trading for one, adding a veteran that's in the NFL who can be talented that either lines up next to George Pickens or replaces George Pickens should they choose to trade him. And there are several candidates across the board here, Alan. And my thing here is that I think there is a specific type of receiver that they need to be going after. And to me, it's wide receiver one types. It's outside the number types. If Roman Wilson and or Calvin Austin are can be even close to what you're hoping that they could be, you can have those speedy, shifty inside guys all you want. But I still think Arthur Smith's offense with just Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, whoever you bring back next year needs another guy like that. Last year, I understood you addressed several positions and fixed several things last season and addressed a lot of things. Now, this has to be the year where you fix that other problem at wide receiver.
Yeah, I think it almost has to be one of two things. It should really be an outside guy, and I think they need two wide receivers. Let me just say that I think they need two wide receivers at least, maybe three. But one of them needs to be an outside guy, and that's why when I see like you look at the free agent list or who might be available in trades, like I have next to no interest in guys like Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, right, Adam Thielen, all these guys that are just older slot receivers that were shifty and now are of questionable levels of shiftiness. I just don't like. The one thing they have is small slot receivers. I'm a little bit more willing to engage the conversation with a guy like Deebo Samuel because I think he brings something different to the table that is not duplicative of what they already have, even though he is primarily a guy who's worked out of the slot. Remember, Arthur Smith uses a lot of those tight splits, condensed formations. So, like, you can do a lot of traditional slot receiver things with the Steelers wide receiver too. I think that someone like that is more okay. But yeah, like if it's just like another little slot guy, I don't. And even like in the draft, like a lot of people, I've seen a lot of mocks with like Luther Burden to the Steelers, and I'm just like, that's what they got. Why do you want more?
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. So in the spirit of that, we had a caller, Taylor from North Carolina, asking about Deebo Samuel. Here was Taylor's question.
Hey, Chris, this is Taylor from Raleigh, North Carolina. Love the show. So I see that Deebo Samuels has requested a trade. What do you think about the Steelers picking him up for a trade? Tell me what you think. Thank you.
Well, Alan, you kind of laid it out there. I think there's a place for a Deebo Samuel in the Steelers offense. I'm just not sure that's the prime one you want to get with with what the Steelers want to do. My thing with this is that Deebo Samuel has been used creatively in the Niners offense as an offset to other stars in the system. To me, Deebo Samuel has to be like, he can't be the big move, right? Like, I think he has to be a puzzle piece move where if you're trading to get him, you're trading minimal assets because you're not giving up a whole lot. He's not taking up a huge chunk of your salary cap space, and that might be a problem because of whatever he wants. And to me, you only go get Deebo Samuel either if you have these bigger plans for George Pickens and you think he's the guy, and then you're going to draft another wide receiver one type in the draft, and then they're your top three, and then you can interchange Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin, and then you have a receiver core there. Or if you're trading away Pickens and you're getting a Cortland Sutton or something like that, or spending a first round pick on one of those first round wide receivers, if that's part of your plan here. But to me, that's where I see Deebo Samuel. What do you see out of, if they go the Deebo Samuel route, what else they have to do around him with him in the offense?
Yeah, I think Deebo Samuel is actually a really good fit for this offense. They like to play a lot of 2 and 3 tight ends. He basically plays like a tight end. You would interchange him for a lot of the tight end stuff that the Steelers did last year. You would interchange him with a lot of the Ben Skoranek and Scotty Miller stuff the Steelers were doing last year. And so, I think there is definitely a role for a player like Deebo Samuel in this offense. I think he has a relatively high floor. I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff. His game has never been based off speed anyway. And so, even if he slows down a little bit as he ages, he's 28, 29. I think he will be 29 next year. I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff aging wise. He is a player that has taken a lot of hits. He's got high miles for his age. There's no question about that. And he's been banged up a good bit. He won't cost very much to acquire. I'm okay with him. I think he's a good acquisition, and an acquisition the Steelers could make right now today, because you can talk trades with other teams. You can't process them until the new league year starts, but you can talk about them right now. You can say, hey, this is what I want. This is what I need. Okay, let's do it. It's something they can accomplish now, and getting ahead of the curve at wide receiver after what happened last year, it's probably not the worst thing in the world. Okay. But that would be a half measure at best in terms of addressing the team's wide receiver position. It's better than nothing. It's better than what they have. But if the only addition to the wide receiver room is Deebo Samuel, it's not going to be a very good group in 2025.
Let's take another question. I believe this is Russ from Hershey, who had a different receiver in mind. Here's Russ.
Hi, CC. My name is Russ Obenstein, calling from Hershey, PA. Huge fan of all your work. Hope you're enjoying your vacation. God knows you deserve it. Would like to know what you would think of trading for Garrett Wilson, and also picking up in free agency either Byron Murphy or DJ Reed. What's your thoughts on that, buddy? Have a good day and keep up the great work. I never miss none of it. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Russ. As always, you can call in like Russ and Taylor did at 412-223-6644 to get your question on the show. Alan, let's talk about first the Garrett Wilson situation. Now, you told me something before the show that I thought was very interesting about whether or not Garrett Wilson would even be an option.
Yeah, I don't think Garrett Wilson's getting traded. That's what I'm hearing from some league sources. And I think his issue with the Jets was about Aaron Rodgers, not about the Jets, and Aaron Rodgers is not coming back. And the Jets would be stupid to trade him anyway. Of course, it's the Jets, so there has been some.
You never know.
Shouldn't just rule it out because of that. But yeah, I've been told he's not going anywhere. And that would be there's a lot of those guys out there that you can squint and say God, they could trade him. DK Metcalf is another one. They could trade him. And certainly if a team is going to do something dumb, it behoove you to be on the other end of that. But I don't think that can be something the Steelers can count on happening entering this offseason.
No, I feel you on that. But let's address the other ideas. I do like the idea of getting a Byron Murphy or a DJ Reed, Byron Murphy outside corner that plays a little bit flexible for the Vikings. DJ Reed more of a slot guy at 5'9". I look at cornerback as a big priority in this Steelers year as well. I don't think that I think that wide receiver is a priority, but corner and getting better and getting sharper there and getting more reliable on those guys, both in the slot and in the outside. I think that needs to be a priority, and the Steelers could probably even serve to draft and sign at that position as well. That's why I keep talking about, like, look, this team got a lot of needs as far as things they should address. And to answer Russ's question, I think cornerback absolutely is on the table, and I like the idea of either one of those players.
I like both of those guys. I'll throw Asante Samuel, Travarius Ward, two more guys into the mix that I think would be good options for the Steelers. And I think they kind of need one of each. They need an inside guy and an outside guy, right?
Yep.
Cam's going to be a free agent. Can't imagine him coming back. Dante Jackson, I could see the Steelers bringing Dante Jackson back, but I think they're going to go out here in free agency and look for an upgrade. And I think Byron Murphy certainly would be that. He's going to be very expensive, but the Steelers have money. They have cap space. They have cash to spend. He's played in a really interesting defense that I think is a good fit for what the Steelers want to do. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely lots of options out there. And I like the idea of a player with some position versatility. They can do a little bit inside outside. I think that's really interesting from the Steelers' perspective, especially because they do have two guys, younger guys that they kind of like in Beanie Bishop and Corey Trice, but they can't just fully give a job to right now with their level of experience. But I think having someone you can kind of move around gives you the option, hey, if one of those guys shows up at training camp day one and just balls out and steps it up and they suddenly become the guy that we thought they might become, then this doesn't become a waste of a signing. You just slide the man over and then you're good to go.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you there. Cornerback's a priority, but and I'm right with you. And there are and they have some options, but they need to be prepared to be flexible, and getting a guy who can help them with flexibility at either the slot or the outside could also be part of that answer there. We will return to that question at some point, because that's going to be that's an area that I'm specifically looking hard at in the draft as well as in free agency. So we will keep that on our mind. But I want to talk to Alan about a question we got about Russell Wilson and some of the sourced media stories that are getting out into the public. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you that this show is also brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. When it's time to hire, you need a partner who works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post a job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. You add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture, and it'll double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, I want to get to this other question from our call-in line. We have another caller call in, and this one, I believe it was Chet from Georgia. I might have misheard their name, but Chet had an interesting question about how the stories are floating around about Russell Wilson and who did what with how the offense was managed. I want to play his question, and I want to get your thoughts and let us talk about this for a segment, because I think this is a very good question.
Hey, Chris. I hope you're enjoying your vacation. This is Jet down in Georgia. My question is, with all these reports that we keep hearing about the coaching staff holding Russ back, sounds a lot like the end of Seattle, sounds a lot like his time in Denver. How can we be sure this isn't just Team 3 running some sort of marketing campaign, some PR project to make Russ look not as bad? When his play fell off the cliff, at some point, Russ needs to be held accountable. Do you think these reports are bogus, or do you think there's merit to it, or is this just a PR stunt, again, by Team 3? Thank you for your time. Love the show. Huge fan. Can't wait to hear back from you.
Thanks, Jed. Appreciate you calling into the show. Call in like Jed at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. Alan, let's talk about this. Your thoughts on how much of this is a game by, like as Jet said, Team 3, which means Russell Wilson's agency and his people that are trying to control the narrative about who he is and what he did for the Steelers this year.
Well, we know at least some of it's true, right? I mean, Mike Tomlin basically admitted that they came into the second Bengals game having sort of thrown away the game plan from the first Bengals game. So, like, we know that some things changed with the Steelers offense down the stretch. Like, we know that. You could see it. As with all things, how much of this is true? Probably depends on who you ask. I bet if we had Arthur Smith here joining us on the podcast, he'd have a little bit of a different take about how things went down the stretch run of the Steelers season with Russell Wilson. You know, it's interesting because we had heard these stories like all in the lead up to the season about Russell Wilson in Denver and Russell Wilson in Seattle, and like things were toxic, and there was all this badness. And like, I gotta be honest, Chris, I was around Russ all season. Like, I never saw any of it. Like I didn't see any of that until like now. Like, after the season ended is really the first time I've seen any of this kind of thing where you're like, I see what's going on here. That kind of comes up in that realm. And I like, this made people angry. Like people were not happy with that this was out there the way it was. Now, I don't know if they were not angry. Again, were they angry because it was true and out there, or are they angry because it's not true? I don't know. You're going to have to get somebody to tell you straight for sure. But like, this was definitely something that was different than what we saw during the course of the regular season.
No, I'm right with you on that. Like, this was very different from what we saw. Like, there was no drama, and maybe it was because Russell Wilson knew that he was going to get a job back, or he was confident that no matter what, unless Justin Fields lit it up and was elite in his first while he was injured, that Russell Wilson was going to have a job when he came back. So maybe he didn't feel the need to do those types of things. But you know, I could tell you, you know, Alan, we're both reporters, right? I want to peel back the curtain for our listeners and viewers, and talk about this and Chet, because it's a very good question about how stories get out there. Reporters are used all the time to get narratives out there. There's several times both of us, you and me, Alan, have received information that we're kind of like, okay, and we just don't do anything with it because we're like, that may be true, but I can't get enough to verify, and I'm not going to run with it. There's other times you look at it and you're like, you know what, I'm trying to verify this. Maybe you put it out there. That's where reporters' intuition really kicks in as far as what you do and do. There's several things that I've heard that I'm like, okay, that sounds crazy. I'm not even going to touch that because I don't think that's real. And then I found out, good thing I didn't touch that one because that was bogus the whole time. That was someone trying to feed me some stuff. But that's part of what happens here with agents, with players, with coaches, with everybody. And it's part of the natural part of the game when there's that black curtain that's up that prevents us from seeing the things that they're talking about. Like, for example, like, you know, did Arthur Smith hold back Russell Wilson? You know, maybe he maybe he was part of that. Maybe he was saying, we do know that Justin Fields told us straight up out of his own mouth that he wasn't allowed to change plays or make switches at the line of scrimmage. So there could be some truth to all sides of that. But to me, Alan, I think that's where it's like it's finding that intuition. And this report coming from Jerry Dulac when this emerged, Jerry's been doing it a long time. I always think it's important to note where everything's coming from, why it's coming from certain directions, and to not take everything as the gospel truth, and unless you know for sure and you've verified it yourself enough as a reporter that it is that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all of these, there's like always like it's all gray. Like there's no like right or wrong answer. Like, in fact, like Russell Wilson may feel as if Arthur Smith held him back, and Arthur Smith may feel as if he did not hold Russell Wilson back. Right. And both of them would be telling you their God's honest truth if they gave you each different versions of this, of what happened. Right. I think it's one of the hardest things as a reporter to do is to determine what is true enough to go with and what isn't, and I think there's definitely been times in my career where you've kind of had a feeling like somebody is trying to get something out here that maybe isn't necessarily completely the way things go, and sometimes you got to try to find a way to say, Okay, well, say it on the record then. Or okay, well, maybe I'll eat it, or maybe I'll run with it, and maybe I think, this, a lot of people hear things. A lot of people, like, you'll see like random people on Twitter, like, hey, my friend's uncle's cousin works in state security, and he said Taylor Swift's going to be at the game tonight. And you're like, that could very well be true. Like, it could very also well be not true. And like, one of the hardest things as a reporter is trying to find out which of those little pieces of information are true or true enough, right? Carry enough truth for you to go with. I remember I was covering a coaching search once, and I had an agent that I had never talked to before, with no relationship, reach out to me and be like, my guy interviewed for that job. And I'm like, you mean your guy that no one has connected to this job whatsoever?
Right.
This job. I'm sure he did. You're definitely not just trying to get a raise out of wherever your guy's working right now, right? Like, and you're calling me about this that we've never talked to before ever. It's like, yeah, sometimes you got to be a little credulous. And I'm not saying like that. I don't know really what happened, what's true here. I don't have an opinion about that. I'm just saying, like, it's a difficult dance to play when you're getting into these he said kind of situations.
No, I think that's the tricky thing here that I think is important to kind of show listeners and viewers that they don't deal with this stuff. I mean, so much of it's stuff like okay, I'll share one little thing that I heard years ago that I immediately dismissed. And one thing that someone showed me, that Mason Rudolph was going around saying that Ben Roethlisberger was so much worse of a quarterback than he was when Mason Rudolph was a rookie. And who knows? Maybe Mason was saying that, but I was like, the person who told me that, I was like, I don't know, man. Like that, like that's something I can't verify unless I hear it from somewhere else. I asked like 2 other people that were like, yeah, I don't know if he's ever said that. And I was kind of like, okay, no big deal, because he's the backup anyway. And who cares? Ben Roethlisberger's starting this year anyways. So like things like that, like, if I had put that out there, if I'd gone out and say, hey, Mason Rudolph feels like he should be starting over Ben Roethlisberger, then this is a whole controversy of something that I'm like, I don't think there's a whole lot of weight to this. I don't think. And then that's the thing. Those are the things that start, like when Mike Tomlin is going to go to USC. He's going to go coach. It's like things like that. I'm like, that's going to distract from the actual things that we need to be working on, talking about, investigating. And I'm just like, I'll put this in the back of my head. And if I hear something else about it, great, we'll go from there. But I'm not dealing with that. And it's so, and there's so many things like that. I mean, Alan, you know me, I'm covering Pitt football, Pitt basketball, and the Steelers at the same time. I get stuff all the time from random people. And there's so many things that I'm like, maybe not, that they're okay. There's more weight to that. There's stuff that we're working on right now at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that I don't get into. And there's stuff that I'm like, I have to weigh every day. That's part of what being a reporter is. So, is Russell Wilson feeding people, or his agent feeding people? Absolutely. There's a motive there. But are the Steelers also doing the same thing? 100%. It's our job, and that's why we try to work very hard to show you what we to work our way through that, learn what we are learning, and then display it in a way that I'm saying, hey, this is my honest opinion of how this is actually happening. And sometimes you can say, hey, this is a report that I've heard a source from this side of things say that this is what happened. And then, in reverse, if it's a different side of things, say what happens. But when we're stating what we think's going on, that's where we're weighing those things. And there's a lot of times when we're giving you opinions and we're not including source on that, it's because we've probably heard something that is leading us to that opinion, but that we've been told not to tell you. So there's a lot of games that are being played here on all sides, and that's why it's so tricky sometimes as a reporter to deal with it.
If you're listening to a reporter give their opinion about something, you can be almost sure that is not just their opinion, that is actually something that they've been told as a fact, that they just cannot repeat as a fact. They can only repeat it as their opinion.
Let me just say this. 2 years ago, I went on Channel 11 and I said the Steelers are going to trade up to the Patriots to get Broderick Jones. I ain't been that. I've got Najee Harris right. I got Devin Bush right. I ain't been that right ever. And the reason I was that right is because I got a little help. And that's how it works. But here's the thing: I can't go out and say, yeah, such and such told me, because it's going to expose things. And so, like, there's times you get it, and there's sometimes it isn't a full, this is definitely what's going to happen. It's like, hey, this is what we're aiming for. This is what could happen. And then you put 2 and 2 together as a reporter and you say, bang, That's what I think it is. And again, that's what I think it is. And when I'm telling y'all, when I believe something, when I think something versus when I know something, I make an important point to make that distinction. And that's why it's a really great question from Chet, because these campaign things and what we're hearing, like, I can't tell you for certain who's on the right here. Now, I can tell you for certain that Justin Fields, didn't complain, but noted that he did not, that he was not able to just change plays at the line of scrimmage. And I can tell you that when we've heard from Arthur Smith, he was more, I would say he was more pro Justin Fields than he was Russell Wilson in some of his, when he offered praise about his quarterback play. And so I can put that together in other things that I've heard and say, you know what? I think there's some credence here that Russell Wilson may be happening here. But am I also acknowledging that this could be a complete story to boost Russell Wilson's profile because he's about to be an unrestricted free agent? That is a possibility, but it's weighing all those things.
I also don't think if it's true, it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like, Russell Wilson was playing poorly down the stretch.
Down the stretch, yep.
One of the things you do when someone is playing poorly is you start to try to protect them. You try to insulate them. You put less on their plate. Like, that's a natural response to some poor play. Like, that's why, like, yeah, I'm 100% sure this is at least half true. How about that as a
100% sure that it's at least 50% true. I love that. We're going to end that segment there. But Chad, I hope that answers your question, and I hope that listeners and viewers understand where we're coming from on that segment. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, my final grades on Stars and Skulls on the Steelers wide receivers. That's going to be interesting. We'll get into that right after this. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel because America's #1 sportsbook gives you so many ways to win. FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. So even if you missed the first few minutes of the game or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle until the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris, Carter, Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, it's time to get to our final grades on the wide receiver group. And as always, you were our grades guy with us. You were primarily the person that did the grade shows with me on Tuesdays throughout the year. But if you missed them, if you're new to the show, this is how I did. After every game, we did a breakdown of the grades, and I graded out guys the way I thought they played. Stars and skulls were the way we did it. 1 to 3 stars for good to elite play. 1 to 3 skulls from bad to all-time terrible play. There's also the dreaded bus ticket when you should have been shipped out of town for how badly you did, or if you did something extra stupid on playing extra bad. You can also just get a neutral grade for not getting anything, which is why some people have don't have that many stars and skulls, because they didn't have any bad, but they didn't have any good. Just like our first wide receiver we get to here, Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller made a couple plays this season. He got 2 stars. I didn't really have any skulls for him because I didn't think that he was a detriment too much. He also wasn't used that much. 2 stars, no skulls. That gets you a C. I have no complaints there. In a similar vein, but I think this is more of an indictment on Arthur Smith and the Steelers and Mike Tomlin, is Mike Williams is kind of in a similar boat. Now, he did make more plays than Scotty Miller, and he got 4 stars with no skulls. That's good enough for a C+ in our book here. But Alan, I get not using Scotty Miller more. I don't get not using Mike Williams more.
And he was out there. Like, people are like, the Steelers never used Mike Williams. So, like, he was out there. He never got the ball. Like, he had like 175 snaps, and what did he finish with? Like 10 catches or something like that?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that was a Russ and him not on the same page thing. I don't know. But it was, 9 catches and 175 snaps. Like, yeah, you just throw him the ball. Like, I don't know. I couldn't. And if, it puts the coordinator in a bad situation, because if for whatever reason he's not getting the ball, how do you keep putting him out there if the quarterback won't throw it to him? Like, you almost have to do. So I don't know, it was very strange. And I thought he was a really good fit for this offense. And I don't understand why it didn't work.
Yeah, it's a mystery, and to me, that is a mark against Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin and how they handled this situation, and something that they need to not do moving forward. In fact, we talked about this with Brooke Pryor when it came to the tight ends. It's like, why was it so important to get Mike Cole Pruitt and Cordero Patterson all these looks when you have Pat Fryermuth, Darnell Washington eating people alive when they get the ball in space? And it's just, I think Mike Williams showed you in his first game with the Steelers, he had that game-winning touchdown against the Commanders, and I thought, okay, that's a really good sign that he can be a weapon for the Steelers, and you saw him marginally throughout the rest of the season. Just a big baffle to me. But a C+ goes to Mike Williams. He would have had a higher grade if he got more chances.
He won the game against the Commanders and then didn't get a ball thrown his way for the next 3 weeks.
It's bizarre. Just so bizarre. And again, you traded for him. You traded for him to get this opportunity.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's keep it moving here. We'll go to another veteran receiver that was brought to the team, but before the season started, and that was Van Jefferson. On the year, I didn't have too many really bad marks for Van Jefferson. He had mistakes here and there. He wasn't that effective in a lot of games, but all in all, when he did make an impact, he had 7 stars in the season, just 4 skulls. That's enough. That's good enough for a C+. When you have 3, when you get to 3 stars more than skulls, that's when you start to like move you up a little bit to that plus range. But Alan, I look at Van Jefferson, and like when he scored a touchdown against the Ravens, I was like, what? How did that was not on my bingo card for this game. I feel like Van Jefferson was a hard worker, but again, he should be more of your 4th option than he should be your 2nd, and he was their 2nd option for a decent part of the year.
Yeah, I mean, just 276 yards on the season it's not going to get it done even as a wide receiver 3, even if you want to be charitable. I did think it was funny that the Steelers got touchdowns from Pruitt, Connor Hayward, Mike Williams, Cordero Patterson, and Van had 2. Yeah, there's a thing about Arthur Smith as an offensive play caller where he just obsesses with these guys that probably shouldn't ever be on the field. It's been a long time thing of his, and it's weird. It's not awful. It's just weird mostly.
Yeah, no, it is weird. I'm right with you there. Let's get to the guys that started to have higher grades in the Steelers offense. This guy I did not expect to have this kind of impact, but like when I went back through my game by game grades, he had 8 stars and no skulls. You know who I'm talking about right now, Alan Saunders?
Calvin Austin.
Well, actually not yet.
Okay.
Actually, we're talking about the other wide receiver, Ben Skoranek, or as I said all season, the Scour Neck, because I couldn't pronounce that man's name right for nothing. But seriously, Ben Skoranek, like his blocking contributions, the occasional times when he caught, I was actually really impressed with how he was that one guy that like I was like, man, this is definitely an Arthur Smith guy, but he made sense and he made plays, and I never really saw him costing the Steelers. And there were several of those games, especially that middle part of the season, where he was making key blocks and made a couple key, receptions where I was like, man, this guy deserves some points. So for 8 stars and no skulls, that's a B- just because, he wasn't involved that much in the offense. But I give a lot of points to Ben Skoranek. He surprised me. I did not think he was going to be as effective as he was in the ways that they were using it.
Well, Ben Skoranek told me earlier this year that he is not a wide receiver, that he is a football player.
There you go.
And so I'm not even sure he should qualify for this. Personally, I think, he's in his own category. But yeah, he's awesome. I think they should bring him back. I'm sold on that.
I think so too. He's like a utility player that you can use in all different ways. Like that's one of the situations like, okay, Arthur Smith, use that guy in these weird co-fangled ways. I think that's one to do there. All right. So as we've been doing these, we work our way up from the worst grades to the best grades. And I know some people are probably thinking George Pickens is at the top, but he is not. He's actually our 2nd best graded wide receiver, tied with Ben Skoranek for a B- because he had 18 stars, good, decent number there, but he had 6 skulls and a dreaded bus ticket on the season. Bus tickets, I don't qualify them exactly as skull. I basically kind of count them as like 4 or 5 skulls in kind of one grading. So that moves him down to a B- range. He does get credit because he did make a decent amount of plays this season. He was a big player for the Steelers. There's no doubt that. But the reason again for the B- is just you expect like this was his year to be A+, to be unstoppable, to take advantage of every opportunity, and to not have the boneheaded moments that like got him the bus ticket. And that's where I think that George Pickens, it wasn't a bad season for him, but it wasn't the height that he could have lived up to.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers got better at quarterback this year.
Yeah.
And I know Pickens was hurt and he missed some games.
He
and
did miss some
probably was still impacted by that injury after he came back. I think it's pretty safe to say now when you look at the totality of his play after the injury where he really wasn't very good. But like he had less yards per game this year than he did last year when it was Kenny Pickett. And I think that's the opposite of what I was expecting. And so, yeah, I mean, and like you said, the off the field stuff, or it's not even really off the field. It's kind of on the field stuff, like the personal fouls in Cincinnati and the eye black. Which one of those two was the one that earned the bus ticket? I don't even remember.
Let me actually go back.
Fighting with Newsom and Cleveland, like you've got plenty of options there. Could have been three of them actually. Now that I go back here and really think about it,
I'm looking at my wide receiver grades. I think I gave him a bus ticket for the last Bengals game.
So none of the.
So what's funny? Geez, yeah, none of the other ones.
I laid out there. It was something else. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I mean, look, bus ticket is appropriate, right? This is the year that George Pickens should be getting a whole lot of money on a contract extension. I don't think it's happening. I think it's mostly like you can nitpick his play, but it's mostly because the other stuff. Given how scarce they are at wide receiver, they would 100% be signing up for someone with 59 catches on 103 targets and 900 yards and 3 touchdowns this year. Like they're 100% into that. It's the other stuff that is the reason that's probably not happening. And so, yeah, I think it's appropriate.
So that's where I'm at there. He gets a B-, but our highest grade in the wide receiver room was none of those guys. The guy you said earlier, it was Calvin Austin. On the year, I gave him 14 stars, only 4 skulls. Like when I look back at this season, there weren't many games I could look back and say, man, Calvin, you really let the team down. He got, and half of those skulls were for his fumble against the Bengals. That was really costly in the last game of the season. And then his other skulls came against the Ravens the first time around and the Falcons in the opener. But this guy had three 2-star games against the Chargers, the Browns the first time, and the Bengals the first time. He had a 3-star game against the Giants, a lot of 1-star games. Like this was for as much as George Pickens needed to show that he could be a little bit could be better than what he was. Calvin Austin did show that. Now he hasn't shown that he's wide receiver 2 just yet or anything like that, but now there isn't but going into last season, you're like, okay, can Calvin Austin, can he be a playmaker in the NFL? I don't know. Now it's like, okay, so there's a role for him to be had, and that he can make plays. Now it's just going to be up to the Steelers to find better ways to use him so that you can exploit that a bit more.
Yeah, I thought like when the Steelers drafted Calvin Austin that his role was probably going to be like punt returner and kind of gadgety wide receiver 4. Like, that's what I was thinking that he would be. And I think he's proved that he can be a little bit more than that. Like, if he's your wide receiver 4, that's a really good group of wide receivers.
Good wide receiver 4.
You got in front of him. And that might happen for the Steelers, and I hope it does. But I think he's proved that he is the one guy in this room that you feel good about going forward to say, like, yeah, I think the Steelers should sign him to a second contract. Yeah, I think they want him here for a while. Yeah, I think there's a role here that he can thrive in. The whole rest of the room is unknown at this point.
Absolutely. Alan, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. What would you got something to say there?
Roman Wilson didn't get a star or a skull for his 5 snaps. I take it.
No, he gets nothing. You don't get grades for snaps. No,
you get incomplete. Didn't get anything there.
IC is the official grade on Roman Wilson. I don't. If you don't get stars or skulls, you don't make the list. But there you go there. But Alan, thanks so much for joining us here. Let people find you, follow you, get more of your work.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now sites account, SteelersNow.com. So where you can find my written work and you can find my podcast, Steelers Morning Rush and Steelers Afternoon Drive, on the Steelers Now YouTube page or anywhere you find podcasts.
Absolutely. He's Alan Saunders. Get all of his great work there. Find me, Chris Carter, on all the platforms, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok, same handle everywhere, at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. You can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those episodes back tomorrow, finishing out the week here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.